You're listening
to the CD Baby
Baby
DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 106 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast. My name is Kevin, and joining me for this Roundtable edition is the Bolt.
Just me again.
Just you again. Yeah, we gotta get this Chris character all straightened out. Funny thing is, though, we were all set to do this podcast last week, and I forgot all the equipment, so we couldn't do it. And then we had visitors from the East here all week, which means our CEO was here. And so by the time we were able to do it, Chris took some days off. How selfish of him.
Tut.
I know. He said he had to get away to get some band business done. I don't know what that means, but apparently he had to get caught up on emails and bookings and such that he didn't get away.
He did leave us with a very good article.
Yes, he did, which we'll be discussing coming up, which I think will be very thought-provoking and maybe raise some hackles, get some people mad, which we always enjoy because that's better conversation.
That's right. CD Baby Podcast, we make you mad.
That's right. And then you'll call, and then you'll feel happy after you express yourself. So we've got that coming up, and so I guess that's everything I've got to start off. Any random thoughts you have before we dive in?
Oh, well, you and I were just talking. We're thinking about how we can make the podcast a little bit more uniform as far as our release date. So hopefully our New Year's resolution for the CD Baby Podcast is that we're going to let our audience know when the next podcast is going to come out, and hopefully we will remember to bring our equipment.
Yeah, we're slackers. And there's been some changes here in CD Baby land that are making it easier, actually. So I now sit right next to both you and Chris.
That's right.
And just all of you who were annoyed that we call you the Bolt will know that not only would it have been confusing on a podcast, but now that you and Chris sit directly to my left, both looking back at me, I look up and go, "Hey, Chris," and both of you go, "Yes." It gets confusing.
We're just going to have to move, because usually the Bolt is only my podcast name. We might just have to bring it into the real world.
And it's confusing to other people as well. So we're just going to, maybe we need to go back with what was your fake name originally?
Robert.
Yeah. We're going to officially make you Robert. Anyway, enough about that. Lots of interesting news items since our last podcast, so let's get into the news.
CD Baby.
Music.
Well, a news item that we are especially excited about is that this week, CD Baby officially announced our new BookBaby brand, which distributes ebooks for independent writers and authors. BookBaby will get your ebook on the iPad, Kindle, Nook, Sony Reader, into Google Books, their bookstore, and more. The digital book revolution is upon us, so it'll be interesting to see how BookBaby develops over the coming year, and we're very excited about it.
Yeah, and if you are an author, I think they're having a deal right now where it's cheaper than normal.
Yeah, check it out. Right now it's $50 off the normal sign-up fee. So head over there, bookbaby.com, and let us know what you think. And if you've got a book or been wanting to get something distributed, check it out. Well, Apple announced their holiday quarter earnings, and as expected, they are huge. The company posted a record revenue of $26.74 billion. That's billion, not million.
Holy
and
man.
Record net quarterly profit of $6 billion. During this period, Apple sold 4.13 million Macs, 16.24 million iPhones, 19.45 million iPods, and 7.33 million iPads.
Wow.
In other news, it had been rumored for some time, but MySpace finally cut about 50% of its staff in a move to streamline the company and sell immediately to the highest bidder. It's still very uncertain what will happen with the social network that was built on the idea of music discovery. Will this truly be the end of MySpace? We'll have to see. And finally, MTV is in the process of planning a multi-platform awards show that focuses on digital music. The show will encompass a blend of internet, social media, and mobile, but no live TV broadcast. While details are still sparse, viewers can count on seeing awards handed out for things like Best App, Best Blog, Best Music Meme, and Best Kanye West Tweet. With this effort, MTV hopes to do for digital music what it did for the music video. Van Toffler, president of MTV Network, says that this show may or may not have a host or a designated start and finish point. Performances will still be a central element, but the show won't be polished and structured like the VMAs. And that's the news I found interesting.
Interesting.
That whole MTV thing sounds like we have this idea, we have no idea what it'll be.
But it's going to revolutionize everything.
It's going to revolutionize music by talking about blogs and Twitter posts. Because
we hear it's the new hot thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought that was funny. It's like, it still could really not have much to do with music. Who made the best music app doesn't have to do with the music itself. So.
Right.
Oh, MTV. We have several companies here that were once great. MySpace. It's always sad to hear when a lot of people lose their jobs, but this was a long time coming. Their relaunch didn't go well, and who knows what'll happen. I mean, there's obviously not going to be any new development until they sell the thing, and who knows what whoever buys it will do with it.
They finally started, moving towards just sort of appeasing the music side of MySpace and the bands. And I think they just had they were trying to do too many things at once for too long, and they sort of missed the boat. Like they were trying to do video, they're trying to produce their own TV shows. They're just rampant advertising. They got too scattered.
It seemed like they got bought by a big company that had lots of money, and they just had fun with it for a while, and the party came to an end and realized that there was nothing to show for it. So that's what it kind of feels like. I don't know. Someone will buy it, someone will keep beating it, trying to do something with it, revamping it. Who knows? But yeah, the only reason I keep our profile is that I still get club bookers and people pointing to our MySpace page and not our band page, so that's why I keep it up. But Apple, there's been lots of talk, Steve Jobs leaving because he's
sick again,
and someone had a post this week saying that Steve Jobs dying will hurt indie musicians. I think indie musicians will continue on even if Steve Jobs dies, but he doesn't look like he's doing so well. But I think Apple computers are gonna continue to dominate. I posted this week a product that they need to develop is a digital camera that runs all their photo apps, because I now have an iPhone 4. The camera on there is far superior to the one I had on my previous iPhone, and all the apps are so darn cool that you can do, which I had some of them on my old iPhone, but now that this camera actually has a much higher quality, they're a lot more useful. And I did something really cool that I sent to some Hello Morning fans this week, where we're fulfilling our Rocket Hub campaign now that the album's done. And we owed them a haiku, so I used one of the cool photo apps to take interesting pictures of the haikus I had printed out, and to make it just look a little more unique. They're each individually shot, so everyone has a different picture and a different haiku, and it just, I was trying to figure out how to make it look cool, and I'm like, hey, I've got this iPhone, it's a cool app.
Yeah, I just got this I just downloaded because I have an iPod Touch, a video application, because I have the iPod Touch that does video. and it makes your videos look like they're shot on some old 70s camera.
Yes.
And it's really fun. I'm already thinking it'd be great for a band video.
Yeah, it's a really cool app. It's called 8mm. I highly recommend it. It is cool. And actually, I tweeted about it, and an artist emailed me saying how amazing it was, and they were working on they were producing this artist that does old-timey music, and so they did this whole video in the studio with it, and it just fit perfectly.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, it's getting easier and easier, that application and an installation of iMovie, and you can make your own music video and post it on YouTube, and it's not hugely time intensive.
Yeah, exactly. Going to what we opened up with the news section with, BookBaby. We're all very excited about that here. And it's kind of interesting now that we've been working on that project. We've been working on it since last year, and it's kind of just now ready for prime time. And the interesting thing is, we obviously spend a lot of time in the music community, just going through and as we've, branched out into the writing community to see how the two have developed differently. And it seems like the writing community is, maybe like 3, 4, maybe 5 years behind the music community as far as digital integration, how high-tech the blogs are, how well people are connected. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, I mean, these devices, the Kindle and the and the iPad and stuff, are still pretty new. I mean, is the Kindle only a few years old?
Yeah, and the iPad's not even a year old yet. So those are all new devices that are exploding. And
so authors and artists who want to produce books are starting to see I can do this, and it's affordable, and I can get worldwide distribution for my book. Why not just do it myself? Why not be a DIY author?
Yeah, and I'm interested to see if this has much spillover into the music community as far as being an opportunity for musicians to distribute music books on their own, or tablature, music lessons,
reviews.
Yeah,
there's all sorts of publications.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious to see how that works. And I think we'd talked in the past about artists who have had songbooks made for their music, and it being a good selling from their website. It might have been David Nevue who does that, who sells the PDFs from his site. But it'd be interesting to see if it's popular for artists to distribute those for the iPad or the Kindle. And I'm not sure if the Kindle would work with that. I would think it would, but distribute music in that fashion.
Yeah.
And you just put your iPad up on the piano, and they already have music stands that hold iPads. So
really?
Yeah, they've got these music stands, because there's that iPad app that is guitar effects and things. There's several of them, but one of them's in the iPad commercial. And so I noticed that there's now a music stand that has an iPad stand. And
count the days before you see an orchestra sitting with iPads.
I've already seen pictures of it.
Really?
I don't know if if it was like a promo shot, but it showed somebody, using, I think there's an app that displays music that way. I've seen lots of apps, but as far as someone actually distributing music books that way, I'm sure there probably are some. I haven't seen them yet.
It's a lot easier just to flip an iPad than to turn a page on a music book.
Yeah, and I literally saw this right before we started recording. Someone made a foot pedal that works with an iPod, and I'm sure that's not far from hooking into an iPad as well. So what this does, I didn't have a chance to read the whole article, but it sounded like, a lot of bands use iPods for tracks, and it looked like you could start and stop. It looked like, regular guitar foot pedal. You could start and stop it,
start a sample
and
or
go on to the
that.
next song and stuff like that. So the iPod revolution continues. So yes, check out BookBaby, bookbaby.com. Distribute lots of books, please.
Yeah, tell your author friends.
Please. All right. Well, today we are going to be discussing a topic that could be somewhat controversial for some people. Chris, who is not here, wrote this fantastic article on our DIY Musician blog. If you don't subscribe to that blog or check it out frequently, you should. The website is diymusician.cdbaby.com. A lot of great articles there. We'll be discussing many of them as the weeks come. But the article that he had written was called, "Should Artists Have to Work a Second Job?" So kind of a bit of a thought-provoking question, but the thing that got him thinking and made him write this article was this quote by John Simpson, the former executive director of Sound Exchange, and he recently warned, "I'm very concerned about the apparent disrespect shown by many in our culture to those who pursue artistic endeavors. One recent survey showed a surprising number of Americans who believe that artists should have to have a second job to support themselves, as they should not expect to be paid for their art. We must educate the public and eradicate these extremely destructive beliefs." So that kind of launched this whole article that Chris wrote that kind of covers like kind of the state of affairs as they sit now and how we got to this point. And he kind of talks about some of the options going forward and just when should an artist get paid? And that's kind of the discussion I wanted to have. When should an artist get paid? Why is it that people think that art shouldn't be paid for? Because that's part of the reason why, you know, we talk a lot about piracy, a lot of the mindset that gets us to that point, you know.
What I didn't really understand is like, so I have my day job and I have my music career, but I'm supposed to get a second job on top of that?
I guess so. Apparently, you're supposed to have art is supposed to be your hobby when you're not working. I think they're saying your first job is supposed to pay your bills. The second job is supposed to pay for your music.
That's a lot of jobs.
Yeah. It sounds tiring.
I know. It's actually, I love the article as well. And it's great because, you know, he doesn't come, and Chris can be a little bit strong-minded in some of his opinions about music, but he really didn't go there. He really sort of took each subject, turned it upside down, you know, like posited some questions and then moved on. And it really spurred a lot of people to weigh in on the blog. And there's really a lot of great stories in the comments section of artists, how they view making music as a musician, experiences they had, experiences from both musicians who make their living at playing music and others who don't make a dime. And they all sort of weigh in on the subject. So it's really quite interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I should also say that a lot of the angle of the article is more from the live perspective. I mean, as far as like whether or not people should get paid for their music, well, that's up to them. If it's in the store and they have it for sale and that's how that, you know, then yes, they should be paid. Whether or not people should buy it, that's a different subject altogether. But if someone's giving away their music for free, obviously, then it's free. I mean, we're talking more along the lines of like, you know, when people put together a band or they start performing publicly, you know, you usually end up getting gigs that just don't pay, and it can be a long struggle to start getting gigs that even have some payment to them. And this kind of growing frustration builds that, okay, it's beyond the point of me just, you know, goofing off in the corner. I'm actually adding value to this establishment, and yet they're not paying me, so what gives?
Right. And some of that is perception. I think that I think it's important not just think, oh, I've done all this work, I've made all these songs, I'm helping this establishment out by, you know, playing music at their joint, but like to think about, you know, what sort of from a business perspective, like how many beers are they selling more because of me? And what is a worthwhile percentage of that income? Because if they only give you $20, like maybe that's all they could give you. Maybe that's all the value you added to their establishment that night. That's not always the case. And I'm sure there's plenty of crooked bar owners out there who aren't going to give you, you know, your worth. But I think that going out and playing gigs for free and, you know, to a sparse crowd at a bar, like it doesn't really make sense. You're going to get paid a lot of money because you're not really generating any.
Yeah. Well, and maybe I should read this. This is there. At one point in the article, Chris mentions, and this is where we're at. Number one, the skilled musicians with mass appeal clearly reap the benefits. You know, like that would still be the major label artists that have mass appeal, that are skilled and have, you know, reaped benefits from that.
Right.
Number 2, the skilled musicians with little appeal have to confront the realities of the laws of supply and demand. If mass appeal is your goal, you must change your art to meet their tastes. If you choose to make niche art that is truer to your vision, a vision with little mass appeal, you will struggle harder to find your target audience. But once you do, you may be able to charge them more for what you offer and command more fan loyalty.
Right.
And then
that's the road less traveled.
Yeah. Number 3, he said, the ones with mass appeal who have little skill, and he says, oh boy, here's where the real trouble begins.
Right.
And I think that is kind of the issue. It's like, you're trying to define what is good for something that's very subjective.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it gets hard, because there's plenty of artists out there that sell a lot that are just total crap. And then there's lots of artists, and, I would think of like, especially like in the jazz world where it's more performance-based, that there's a lot of amazing musicians, but jazz doesn't have as much appeal as some, pop rock band who may not be great at their instruments, may have only been playing for a year, but they wrote a catchy tune and now they've got a huge fan base and people are willing to pay them to see them, where, jazz can be a little bit more obscure, and especially in certain parts of the country. And so it's kind of like, it's a tough thing to answer.
Yeah. If we're going to do it from like a marketing perspective, you could look at the numbers, like how many jazz albums are bought every year, like how many jazz albums are bought in my town every year, and what percentage of those jazz albums sold do I expect to sell? Like the numbers can get pretty small, and you have to be
then depressing,
but you have to be realistic. And yeah, I love the way that Chris put it, because it's not about how good you are. It's about whether you have mass appeal. And like mass appeal means that you can sell and make much more money. It doesn't mean you don't have to be skilled. You just have to have mass appeal. If you want to, forge your own way and you're not worried about appealing to an audience, then you risk making no money at all, but there's also a possibility that you might find your true art form and make something totally great. Mm-hmm. But there's not necessarily there's not necessarily a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow if you're completely trying to create something unique and innovative, and there could be, but not necessarily.
Yeah, I guess a couple things there. I would tweak what you said slightly if I were to say it and say that, not that you have to have mass appeal, but you got to be able to connect well with people, because I think where a jazz artist, yes, the people buying jazz albums is smaller than people buying pop rock albums, but just the nature of jazz is, people set up and play and they're very skilled, and that's pretty much it. Where you say you go to a singer-songwriter or somebody, there's a lot of expressing themselves sometimes. There's a lot of communication with the audience and drawing the audience in. And I think that's, something that maybe some of those niche audiences or niche markets could do better.
I'm sure some of our audiences would say that, jazz musicians interact with an audience as much as anybody. But the issue is, like, if you're interested in making money, like, you have to expand to, you have to listen, you have to look at the audience, you have to look at the buying public, you have to be like, okay, not a lot of jazz albums are being bought. I love jazz music. How can I make my jazz music maybe appeal more to people who aren't into jazz? Yeah. How can I, maybe do some non-traditional jazz songs, maybe open up the repertoire so it's not just jazz. Obviously, I'm just using jazz as an example. I'm not trying to pick out anybody who...
They're all going to hate us.
But, it could be any genre of music that is fairly narrow, death metal. Like, you're not probably going to make a ton of money. Well, I don't know, with death metal, because it's such a narrow audience. But if you do death metal and try to open up that genre to hard rock or roots rock and try to mix in some other things like that, you're going to broaden your audience.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I was going to say was that some people are going to find this conversation frustrating, because basically what we're saying is the only music that has market value is anything that, is marketable and that art is just not worth anything. And that's the hard thing that some people are going to take it that way. And I don't think that's the case, but I mean, that's how it's always been. I mean, look at the top painters that the average, person knows about. It's not the people that, the people that are revered in the real art community in the, like as far as paintings and things aren't the ones that the average person knows about. And,
one of the comments on the blog was from John Patton, and he said, the idea that musicians should be able to support a middle-class lifestyle by playing music is simply counter to almost all of human history. Mozart came from a good family, was sponsored by European royalty, and still died poor. It's the same for most artists. James Joyce never made enough from his writing while he was alive. It is kind of a, maybe a misconception, or maybe it's asking a little lot just to expect that because you make something great, that people are going to understand its greatness and pay for it what it's actually worth.
Yeah. I've heard up in Canada that there's some sort of government thing you can apply for to get money to be an artist. But this is also the same country that gave us Nickelback.
Right. Well, there are, and I think that there are a lot of times, there are public funds for people and artists and musicians that are creating something that, maybe is not as easily marketed in the normal ways. When people, a lot of times that's what these funds are for geniuses and people who are trying to do something different that people might not understand at face value. You can apply for a grant, or you can, do something through a college that, you might not be able to do with having just raised money through normal, means.
But definitely want to hear people's comments and thoughts on this. And hopefully people will call in, let us know what you think. When should an artist get paid? We'll put a link to the article. You have some more comments there, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I have one from Dave, and he just said his name was Dave, and he says, I play in a punk band, late 70s New York City version. We're not well received locally in North Carolina, so we usually have to hit the road to gig. No big deal, but I just want to get paid as much as the truck driver who delivered the beer. We drove just as far, if not further. We unloaded our own equipment, and hell, we'll even pack it all back up again when we're done, and hopefully leave your bar in the same shape it was before it arrived. We play the music for free because we love it. But I would like to get paid for all the physical labor that goes along with it. Please pay me as much as the beer delivery guy. They think they're doing us a favor, giving us gas money. Sell merch or die.
That's funny.
So, I mean, I think that that's sort of an example of flawed logic. I mean, I think that, the money that's getting paid to the beer guy is a very quantifiable amount of money that he's offering.
People stop buying beer, the beer guy loses his job. Doesn't deliver to that location anymore.
Yeah, and who knows how many people at the bar that they're playing for free are buying beer because the punk band is there. Chances are they're still going to buy beer either way.
Exactly.
So, and I know it sucks to load up your van and it sucks to drive and everything, but he says he's playing for the love of music. And that's why you do these things. That's why you load up your truck, and that's why you drive out of town is for the love of music. And I understand that people say, no, I do that to get paid, but there are other jobs you can do and get paid more in most cases.
That's why you should be getting a second job.
Yeah.
Support your music habit. Did you have any other comments on there you were going to read?
I do. Okay, this one's from Little Birdie. You really captured a lot of the issues, and of course, there being no answer concluded appropriately that you were arguing with yourself. I've been without a second job for quite some time now, a leap of faith. No, I didn't get paid enough from gigs to pay rent, but between all the people who believe in me, there are plenty of couches to stay on in the different cities I play in. I think the bars and venues are the ones who can make a difference. If they want their establishment to be consistent about hiring good music, they should pay well, but be discerning in who they hire. I also think that the truly committed and skilled, Though they may not rise to the top, they will still rise. When audiences hear something they like, they are full of helpful suggestions for more venues to play, places to stay, etc. I don't have hugely high hopes, but I do have hope. The history of true artists has never been one of riches. Just a bit of dignity, that's all we really need.
That's all we ask. Just a little dignity.
Just a little dignity.
Just don't spit on me when you walk down the street.
And the moral of Little Birdie's story is like, you can do it. You can go out there. You don't need to have a job. You can go play music, but you're maybe not going to make a middle class income.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not going to make much of an income at all.
Well, the one thing thinking about this story, this article, and also just because what it ultimately comes down to is music. There's a lot of artists out there. There's a lot of opportunity now that with the internet and there seems to be a lot more venues. At least since living in the Portland area, the number of viable venues here in town seems to have doubled since I've lived here, if not more. So there's lots more opportunity to play live, but you still have to break through the noise. And so I was thinking about that, and this past week I bought an album on iTunes, and the reason I bought it was because I was listening to a podcast, and the album was Jeff Beck. He's a guitar player, and his latest album was out last year, but I was listening to a podcast, and it was a half-hour interview with him, and he just told so many interesting stories that you're like, I've got to hear this. And it took the meaning of listening to the album to a whole nother level. Especially being a guitar player, one of the things he was sharing was about the making of the album. He had cut his finger at some point. He didn't really say how or with what. It wasn't from playing guitar or anything, but he really cut it pretty badly, enough where it was taking several months to heal. So it sounds like it probably had stitches and stuff. And so he was talking about he had to make the album anyway. I'm sure studio time was booked, things were in process, and it's not just like you can just, throwing a wrench at that level into everything means possibly waiting another year to do the album. And, so he was talking about how some of the guitar solos, there was some spotty parts because his finger wasn't working that great. And I thought, that's perfect. It makes me want it even more, knowing that there's this element of humanity in it. I'm going to listen to it. And of course, it still sounded perfect, but knowing that to him, making music is still a struggle, even somebody at that level. And he also told some other stories about how he was there at the session with Stevie Wonder when he wrote Superstition, and originally it was supposed to be his payment for playing on that particular session, not Superstition, but it was a different song they were recording. He was going to give it to Jeff Beck to record. Uh-huh. And so it was just all these stories like that, and being able to convey your music career like that, it just makes you want to hear the music and makes you want to buy it, as opposed to just go and consume it on Pandora or someplace and then just move on. So right. I thought that thinking about the idea of when artists should get paid, or it's a really tough question to answer, but when you draw people in like that and you have the talent to back it up, you're going to get paid. And it may not be just from album sales, it may be from live shows, it may be from other income streams, but you got to make that connection. And, I already had a couple Jeff Beck albums, but after listening to that interview, I'm a fan now. And I think that was a really cool example of just, him being human, and which kind of separates from the just buy my CD, noise that's out there. Right.
And I don't mean to depress musicians out there, because there are a lot of opportunities to make money, and there's probably more diverse opportunities to make money as a musician than there ever has been. But I think that there's this weird sort of disconnect, at least my perception of Dave, is that just because you're working hard on something that you should get paid. And I think that you need to combine working hard with a little bit of marketing savvy to understand that you're producing something that people want to pay for.
Yeah, exactly. And it is weird with venues, local venues, because, they could be playing at this venue where he wants to get paid, and it could be that they're not getting paid because the venue owner doesn't think it's worth paying them. But then the next night the venue owner could be paying a hefty penny to get some act that they do think is worth it.
Right. They might, punk bands don't get paid, but jazz bands do. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's a weird thing you have to navigate. But anyway, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic of when an artist should start getting paid for their art. Any comments or thoughts about, how you've navigated that in your band or your artistic career, and anything you do in order to ensure you do get paid, or how you've dealt with venues in order to get better payment. But you can call us at 206-426-5683 or email us at info@cdbabypodcast.com, and we'll put a link on the blog at cdbabypodcast.com to the article that Chris wrote. One thing that just popped into my mind is we had a venue here in town that just replaced its booker, who is very well known in not only the Portland music community, but the community at large. One of the reasons this person lost their job is because the venue said that they weren't treating local musicians well and that they weren't getting paid what they deserved.
Interesting.
And I've done some shows with this person as far as like Hello Morning playing, and it was pretty ridiculous what was coming off the money at the door. It would be like $1,500. This is just a local band playing on a regular night. It's a highly sought after venue even for national acts coming through Portland, but they have a lot of local music as well. And they would charge like $150 for catering, and it was literally a bowl of chips and salsa. Not kidding. That's exactly what it would say. $150 for catering. There would be like $1,000 for marketing, and it was all they were doing was their weekly ad in the the local rags that run that music zines that run that stuff.
So this booker was maybe pocketing some of this
I don't think they're pocketing, but they were just kind of when they started out, the first venue they were at, it was a very nice venue, and there was few venues in town. Like I said, there's been a lot of venue growth here, and there's the music scene to support it, and so they moved on to a different venue, and I think they were starting to have harder time getting acts who wanted to play because now there was more options, and they were tired of getting ripped off. I mean, I knew lots of people who said, I'm not playing there anymore. Why play there? I bust my butt. I get people out, and I get $50 or $100. And it's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. It's not, have I proven that I'm worth it? It's like, I filled the place. They paid $10 to get in, and you gave me $100. I don't think so.
Well, I'm sure there's lots of stories like that out there.
Yeah, so we'd love to hear your stories about getting paid. It's always an interesting thing. It's always challenging for the artists to navigate that, and so let us know. Well, we didn't have any phone calls this time around. They seem to come in waves. We'll get a ton all at once, and I can't use them all. And then the next time around, we'll just not have any, but I've got an email that I wanted to share. This is from Sam King, and this is only part of his email. He asked me some other questions I'm not necessarily going to read, but he said, I thought it would be really cool to have a podcast on releasing an album. I know as a rule you need to plan for your release date 3 months in advance, but talk about what those steps are, flyers, online hype, press, etc., and how you can take advantage of as much of that as possible. Maybe cover the release show itself too. What other things you can do to make it amazing as possible, film, live stream, contest giveaways. Also, sneaky things like redeeming an album download card with every ticket at the door so it counts as a unit sale. Basically, everything you could do to make a CD release as successful as possible. And we actually have a free guide that you can get if you go to members.cdbaby.com. It's called Countdown to Maximum Exposure that covers a lot of that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. No, but it's definitely worth something we should talk about on the podcast. If there was an artist who, if you've had a release show recently that was amazing and you did a lot of work and took some steps, really thought out steps to making it happen, let us know. We might get you on the podcast.
But you're not really going to be able to sound scan, record sales at the door.
No, unfortunately not. But I don't think SoundScan matters anyway. So.
SoundScan doesn't matter anymore, so don't worry your head about it.
Yeah. But thanks for that email, Sam. I think that's a good idea, something we should cover. But yeah, get that guide. Go to members.cdbaby.com, download that guide. There's some good information in there. And but I've got a album release show for Hello Morning coming up, and it's less than 3 months away. I haven't done anything. Nearly had a panic attack yesterday when I looked at the calendar and how close it was. So, yeah.
Well, maybe you should read that book, Kevin.
All I can say is help. But, releasing albums. We've had that debate before, whether or not an album release show is worth it. I think we had an article about it, and I think it is.
Derek, the founder of CD Baby, he was against them, wasn't he? Wasn't he saying just get out your album as quick as possible?
Yeah, and I think the spirit of what he was saying, that came, from a few years back, and the spirit of what he was saying is that, don't finish an album and then hold on to it forever and then release it. I mean, he was saying get it out as soon as possible, but I think the importance of the release show where we kind of landed on was that it's a pivotal point where you can rally the press and say, look, we're releasing an album, check us out. I don't necessarily think, holding it until that very day really matters. I mean, we had it on CD Baby for like a month before our last album release, and nobody knew about it, and so
right. And we've talked before about like trying. It's not as easy and probably not worth it to try to time everything so that everything drops at 12 midnight on the day of your release. Big record labels might be able to do that, but it probably doesn't even have that big of an effect anymore. Yeah,
but they're still valuable for getting it's a reason for the local press to write about you, and it also actually is an easier way to get a gig. Venues will give you a better slot knowing it's your album release because they expect that you're going to do a lot more promotion for it. So.
That's why I tell them every time I get a gig, it's my album release.
Maybe someday you'll finish that album.
I know.
And actually release it. So, again, our number is 206-426-5683. And our email is info@cdbabypodcast.com. And any final thoughts?
I'll just fill in for Chris R. and say, peace.
Yeah, next time we'll force him to be here. None of this, I've got to get away to catch up on my music career. What kind of BS is that?
Exactly.
So, anyway, we'll catch you next time. More podcasts coming. I do have some interviews I still need to edit.
You falling asleep over there?
No. No, not at all. So, yes. So we appreciate you. We appreciate you listening. Thanks for see ya. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, broadcasting from Portland, Oregon, USA.